Welcome. The title of this lecture is The Socialist Mind. The rise of the standard of living due to the innovation, entrepreneurship, and industrial productivity of the Industrial Revolution was undeniable. Life for those experiencing the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century was remarkably different from previous world history. People enjoyed the use of modern everyday consumer products and devices that were affordable due to mass manufacturing. Many found some of the new inventions spectacular. For example, people were in awe of railroads. Land transportation had not changed much in the previous 2,000 years. The Romans and everyone since hitched horses to a chariot, cart, wagon, or carriage. The advent of the railroad engine was stunning. The power and speed of a railroad steam engine symbolized an era of technological progress and higher quality of life. However, some intellectuals yearned for the creation of a new society that dismissed the free market ideas of the Industrial Revolution. Socialism became a powerful intellectual and social force. The Industrial Revolution began in Britain and extended to continental Europe in the 19th century. Almost everyone welcomed it. Kings and nobles, who were the traditional rulers of Europe, were suspicious of political reform ideas and capitalist enterprise, but they saw how Industrial Revolution innovation improved the material life of everyone. The strongest champions of industrialization were liberals, not to be confused with how the term is defined today. Unlike radicals, liberals opposed any tampering with the economy. They embrace small government and capitalism. One definition is classical liberalism is a political and economic ideology that advocates the protection of civil liberties and laissez-faire economic freedom by limiting the power of the central government. For liberals, unregulated private enterprise was the answer for creating a better society. Liberals believed that self-interest and natural competitive impulses were essential in establishing a strong economy. People worked harder when they acted from self-interest. Liberals looked at the wisdom of Adam Smith. Liberal ideology consequently opposed collectivist theories. Historians trace the roots of liberalism to the democratic practices of ancient Greece and to the Christian affirmation of the worth and dignity of the individual endowed by God with freedom to make moral choices. Liberals' concern for individual liberty also shared some common ground with the Enlightenment. Rejecting the arbitrary authority of aristocrats, liberals held that man could make his way in life through his own actions. Moreover, when government had the consent of the people, political leaders were less likely to violate individual freedom. The celebration of individualism was generally good, but there were liberals who lacked compassion for the poor. One example is Thomas Malthus, an Anglican clergyman who wrote the book titled Essay on the Principle of Population in 1798. Malthus was born in 1766 and he studied mathematics and natural philosophy at Cambridge University. He had good debates with his father, who was an ardent admirer of Jean-Jacques Rousseau. His father urged him to write on his thoughts concerning population. Malthus argued that food production could not keep pace with an expanding population. He wrote, "I may fairly make two postulata. First, that food is necessary to the existence of man. Secondly, that the passion between the sexes is necessary and will remain nearly in its present state. These two laws, ever since we've had have had any knowledge of mankind appear to have been fixed laws of our nature, and as we have not hitherto seen any alteration in them, we have no right to conclude that they will ever cease to be what they are without an immediate act of power in that being who first arranged the system of the universe and for the advantage of his creatures still executes according to fixed laws all its various operation. Assuming then my postulata are as granted, I say that the power of population is indefinitely greater than the power in the earth to produce subsistence for man. Population, when unchecked, increases in a geometrical ratio. Subsistence increases in arithmetical ratio. Malthus' evidence included the observation of startling population growth in the American colonies where means of subsistence were abundant. He lacked hard demographic information for his study, but his thesis again was quite startling, quite controversial. Malthus was a skilled writer who framed his argument clearly. Europe's first systematic study of population growth generated much interest in intellectual circles. He did not intend to have a precise mathematical description of natural processes, but by using the terms geometrical and arithmetical, he had made his point how population growth and food production could not match. If there was no natural adjustment, famine, for example, there would be too many people and too little food. As for living standards, when they improved, the population would grow, and then this would result in reversing any gains. Malthus's ideas received the support from other liberals who agreed with Malthus that the government and any social legislation could not alter the law of population growth. Any state action or philanthropy was futile. No matter how well-intentioned, attempts to alleviate poverty and suffering would only make things worse. Although it was pessimistic, Malthus' cold logic echoed Enlightenment rational analysis. What upset thinkers was Malthus' belief that humans could not do anything to seriously affect the tendency of population to grow faster than means of subsistence. His rejection of legislation to assist the poor made him unpopular with 19th century intellectuals who believed the government should play a greater role in guiding society and improving the condition of the lower class. Karl Marx, for example, despised Malthus, even though the Anglican clergyman had softened his position in later writings. Whereas liberals favored the ideal of liberty, socialists like Karl Marx cherished the ideal of fraternity. People are by nature good, and without artificial distortions of social inequality and poverty, they would treat each other as sisters and brothers. Socialists demanded the creation of a new society. Like Malthus, they embraced rational analysis, but unlike him, they advocated a harmonious social order that benefited all classes. Socialism and the idea of a planned economy, public ownership, and equality of condition were attractive to the bulk of intellectuals and activities desiring a better world. Sociologist Peter L. Berger wrote that whereas capitalism lacked a mythic quality, socialism has been singularly blessed with myth-generating potency. Socialists cherish the notion of brotherhood. Socialists believe that people were by nature good and individualism was problematic. Cooperation rather than competition was a better model. Socialists argued that private property should be abolished and replaced by state ownership. Early socialists tended to be from France. One early French socialist was Henry de Saint-Simon. Henry Saint-Simon was born in 1760. During the French Revolution, he renounced his title. He was an aristocrat, and he declared scientific knowledge could bind society. The key to progress was proper social organization. He viewed aristocrats and lawyers as parasites who should give way once and for all to the doers of society. The doers of the society were scientists, engineers, and industrialists. The doers would carefully plan the economy and guide it forward. Saint-Simon stressed that every social institution should strive to improve conditions for the poor. He favored rational management in which directors, and these would be a group of so-called experts, would oversee the enterprise. Now, such expert control was necessary to improve the conditions for the poor. Saint-Simon had little use for Christianity, and some of his followers approved sex outside of marriage. His work never went beyond theory. Another early socialist was Charles Fourier. Charles Fourier was born in 1772. Detesting the urban wage system, Charles Fourier focused on the idea of a socialist utopia. In great mathematical detail, he conceived self-sufficient communities in which 1,620 people lived communally on 5,000 acres devoted to both agriculture and industry. Fourier supported the idea of free sexual activity, and he wanted the institution of marriage to disappear. He hoped that a wealthy philanthropist would finance his communities, but no one came forward with the necessary money to support his visionary schemes in Europe. In Great Britain, a type of industrial socialism was promoted by Robert Owen. Born in 1771, Owen was part owner of a cotton mill in Scotland. Like other socialists, he believed the social and economic order of the industrial age needed to be replaced with a system that placed greater importance of community group living rather than on competition. Testing his socialism in the United States, he established a model community at New Harmony, Indiana. So this was something he wanted set up in America. The community was based on common and equal ownership of property. However, the rapid demise of the community suggests that utopian socialism did not have much appeal, certainly not much appeal in America. Nonetheless, Owen is recognized as the father of British socialism. A more influential form of socialism came from the pen of Karl Marx. Marx was born in 1818 in the German Rhineland. His middle-class parents were of Jewish origin, although they became Protestants. Marx went to study law at the University of Bonn, but a year later he transferred to a much better institution, the University of Berlin, which was the hub of Hegelian philosophy. At Berlin, he studied philosophy. Marx completed his doctoral thesis in 1841, but he did not find a university teaching position. He eventually ended up in Paris, where he met Friedrich Engels, the son of a German industrialist who also owned a cotton factory in Manchester. The two socialists would work together on writing various writing projects for decades. In 1848, they published the Communist Manifesto. Because of his radicalism, Marx was expelled from Paris. He eventually moved to London, where he remained the rest of his life. Many of his years in London with his family were in poverty. He did not work, and instead he spent years at the library doing research. Initially, the Communist Manifesto did not receive much attention, and few had read it. The pamphlet consisted of no more than 12,000 words. The intention of Marx and Engels was to urge exploited workers throughout Europe to prepare themselves for the coming revolution by uniting across national boundaries. The Communist Manifesto is a concise statement of the basic tenets of Marxism. The philosophy of Marx and Engels was built on a materialist view of society. Human beings were defined by their labor. The wealthy own the means of production. They win freedom for themselves based on rights to property. The propertyless working class possess nothing but their title as human beings. Thus, workers can liberate themselves only by liberating humanity. Marxists use the terms bourgeoisie, petite bourgeoisie, and proletariat. The bourgeoisie, defined in economic terms as the capitalist class and in political terms as the ruling class. The bourgeoisie own or control the major units of the country's economy. The petite bourgeoisie are typically those who represent a class of independent proprietors, such as farmers, artisans, and self-employed people. The proletariat are those who do not own or control the means of production, and thus are compelled to sell their labor power to the bourgeoisie. As stated in the Communist Manifesto, the history of all past society is the history of the struggle between the classes. Developing the materialistic conception of history, the Communist Manifesto demanded an overturn of capitalism, the destruction of the social structure of the capitalist state. Its demands included confiscation of landed property, abolition of the right of inheritance, state control of banks, factories, land, and transport, and unification of all labor and education. The Communist Manifesto concludes with a call to violently overthrow the whole contemporary social order. Let the governing classes tremble before the communist revolution. The proletariats of all countries unite. Das Kapital, published in 1867 to 1883, was Marx's major work. He planned to write 3 volumes, but he only completed volume 1 before his death. Engels was the one who collected Marx's writings for volume 2 and 3. On page 1 of his book, Marx writes, quote, "The wealth of those societies in which the capitalist mode of production prevails presents itself as an immense accumulation of commodities." Well, here we see his recognition of the productivity of capitalism, something certainly he did not like to see. And also he was not shy about his opinions of others who were supportive of a free market system. For example, he referred to Adam Smith's perverted analysis and his arriving at an absurd conclusion. David Ricardo and others were guilty of great errors, according to Marx. Marx's predictions included the income gap between capitalists and workers would increase. More and more independent producers would be forced down into the proletariat, leaving a few rich capitalists and a mass of poor workers. Workers' wages would, with short-lived exceptions, remain at subsistence level. The rate of profit would fall. Capitalism, consequently, would collapse because of its internal contradictions. Proletariat revolutions would also occur in the most industrially advanced countries. Assessing such predictions, one can see that Marx was in error. Almost every prediction was wrong. His critics viewed socialism as a false religion that wanted to take away the rights of an individual. There is no record of Marx setting foot in a mill, factory, mine, or other industrial place in his whole life. His published work depended on the flawed and outdated research of Friedrich Engels' condition of the working class in England. He also used other sources of dubious value. For example, the Royal Commission on Children's Employment of 1842 conclusively demonstrated that earlier working conditions in small pre-capitalist workshops were far worse than in the big cotton mills. It appears that Marx distorted his evidence. Historian Paul Johnson claims that the book, referring to Das Kapital, was and is, quote, structurally dishonest. Scientific was Marx's strongest expression of approval, but truthfully, in all matters, he was anti-scientific. He did not pursue objective knowledge by the careful search for and evaluation of evidence. For example, his labor theory of value was flawed. He held that the value of any good depended upon the amount of labor spent producing it. Workers produced machines and goods. Capitalists sold these goods. The money that capitalists received was above the cost of labor. As Marx saw it, profits were unwarranted charges added to the cost of producing goods and services. Marx argued that this represented exploitation. Exploitation and alienation were themes that his followers focused on in their critique of capitalism. Johnson identifies three strands in Marx: the poet, the journalist, and the moralist. Together and in combination with his enormous will, they made him a formidable writer and seer. Most of his poetry disappeared, but about 40 poems survived. The poetic gift manifests itself intermittently in Marx's pages, his other works, producing some memorable passages, in the sense that he had more intuition rather than reason when it came to presenting his information. So Paul Johnson argues that Marx remained a poet to the end. He had good instincts for journalism. For 10 years, Marx wrote for the New York Daily Tribune as a European political correspondent. Marx found his moral impulse from his hatred of usury and money lending, and this explains his anti-Semitism. Marx's explanation of what was wrong with the world was a combination of quote, student cafe anti-Semitism and Rousseau. Marx left a lasting legacy, despite the fact that much of his analysis rested on incorrect predictions about the increasing misery of workers and the inflexibility of the capitalist system. The force of his ideas derived from their identification with issues of injustice. He fell short in offering much on economics. His economist Thomas Sowell argues that Marx had great political influence, but his work left little trace on the development of economics. Consequently, Marxist economists, quote, typically use other economic concepts in their professional work. Marx did have a major impact on the development of socialism. To this day, socialists believe that a planned economy will enable them to maximize human happiness. Concerning public ownership, socialists are convinced the community should own all productive property. Equality of condition among the people is paramount. Finally, socialists regard selfishness not as an innate human characteristic, but as a result of living in flawed social institutions. Marx was exclusively and brutally horizontal in his theories, teaching that there was no hope for society apart from a soulless materialism and revolution, bloody or otherwise. As was the case with early socialist thinkers, he had no place for God, the Bible, and moral standards. Marx lived as an alien in England, knowing only a few workmen, nor did he wish to know the workers in mass, who to him were abstract beings who fitted neatly into his loveless scheme of things. Thank you.